Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. Time for a new book review, and this time round I'm delighted to share this wonderful book by Martin Latham called The Bookseller's Tale. David Mitchell here, a quote on the first page says, "A joy, magpie-minded, relentlessly engaging," and it was. As you can see, I've got a whole heap of tabs here simply because much of what I was reading here simply took my fancy because it was something that I also agreed with. Now, The Bookseller's Tale was written by a bookseller himself. Martin Latham has been selling books for Waterstones for many years. Now, Waterstones, I believe, is a bookstore in London in the UK. I don't know if anywhere else. I certainly haven't seen them in Australia. I think the big bookstores here in Australia are Readings, which is where I got this book, and Dymocks. We do have lots of independent booksellers, which is great to see. A whole heap of secondhand bookstores as well, which I trawl through and spend much of my time in myself. But I found this in Readings in Carlton when I spent a couple of hours with my good friend Fiona, and we went into the bookstore and we went our own separate ways. Isn't it wonderful that you can go into a bookstore and all of a sudden things go quiet? If you're with friends, everyone just kind of disappears and does their own thing. And in this book, Martin talks about that concept, the fact that you have your own relationship when you go into a bookstore. It's kind of quiet, you're in your own world, and you never know what you might discover. I love this book. I loved the fact that he gave it from a point of view of a bookseller who has sold many books and who has had many stories in his bookshops over the years. At one stage, even Spike Milligan was answering a phone call once. But there was a whole heap of other chapters, all related to different aspects of selling books that I never knew about. And I'll give you some examples. One of the first chapters, he makes this comment about the subtle art of recommendation. And he says, people who love books know that they shouldn't overly recommend books to people, because just because they like a book and love it and it changes their life forever might not necessarily be the same feeling that others have. And so when you recommend a book, you automatically just kind of downplay it and you go, yeah, you'd like this book. Because you don't want to be put in a position where the other person might say, what? Why did you like that book? And I didn't get that same impression from it. So the subtle art of recommendation was quite amusing for me, because I had exactly that same thing happen to me. He also talks about comfort books. So hold that thought, because he does talk about comfort books and how there's always a book that we love that we always go back to. And I must admit, my comfort books, there are a couple, but one that is a comfort book, but also where I've overly recommended it, but it has fallen flat every single time to other people, is my favorite book of all time, which is J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. I have over recommended this book to so many people, and guaranteed I should have used the art of subtle recommendation. Hey, you might like this book. It's not for everyone. The character could be misconstrued as being selfish, but I should have done what Martin Latham said and just not overly recommended this book, because guaranteed so many people have hated this book, whereas I have fallen in love with it. And this is my comfort book. Another comfort book for me is, oh my God, A Movable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. This is utterly beautiful. So when Martin Latham talks about comfort books, I guess I took some pleasure out of it, because I thought, I can actually understand what he's talking about here. He does talk about libraries and how we find libraries and how we love libraries, and I've mentioned on this channel so often how libraries for me are my third space, my third place away from home. I'm going to say away from work, but my work now is at home. So I guess my libraries are my second space. And libraries allow me to lose myself, and each library for me is very different to each other. And I'm quite lucky to live in an area where I've got about 9 libraries all around me, and I go to each one. Each one has a different feel about it. Each one has a different librarian who I could chit chat with, and different books, obviously. So he talks about library. He also talks about collectors. He talks about these wonderful stories of people who are obsessed with books and they love collecting books. I was really surprised how some of these collectors over the years were so obsessed with their books, and they had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of books. They would buy stores of them, or they would then sell them off or through their estate to libraries in the area. So I wasn't aware of, I guess, the stories of collectors. Another particular big thing for me was around the same time I was reading his book, I had gone to a new library in the area, and I'd gone with my parents. And when we left the library, I said to my father, "Why didn't you borrow any other books?" He was empty-handed. I couldn't believe it. Who comes out of a library empty-handed? Anyway, he wasn't carrying any books. And I said to him, "So is there a reason why you didn't borrow any books?" And he said to me, I don't understand the numbering system. I couldn't find what I wanted to find." And he said, how did they come up with this numbering system? And then I went off and said, well, that's the Dewey Decimal System. But that's all I could say, because all I knew, there was a Dewey system. It had certain categories, but I didn't know the history. And so this book gave me the history of this awful man by the name of Dewey, who I then investigated and even wrote a blog post about the fact that he was pretty much scum, and the way he categorized the books were categorized with his biases as well. And so this book got me down a rabbit warren of the Dewey Decimal System and how bad it is, and how now we don't even call it Dewey simply because he was an odious guy. He was kind of like the Jeffrey Epstein of the library world. Anyway, so there you go. What else can I say? Booksellers. He talks about marginalia, and again, that amused me because I haunt secondhand bookstores, and I have bought so many secondhand books in many years, and what I do love is checking out the marginalia of previous owners of the books. Now, I was looking for one book in particular because it came from Evelyn Waugh's When the Going Was Good. This was a secondhand book that I bought for $2, and in it was a letter by this young man to a mate of his saying that he dropped him off drunk one night at his home and that he hopes he feels better. But I don't have the letter. I actually threw it out, but I still kept his bookmark. Good on you, Shannon. Another book that I had with marginalia in it was this one, The Mutiny on Board HMS Bounty, by the man himself, my favourite guy in history, William Bligh. And the marginalia in this book was pretty good because it was a gift. It was from Dad to Alan for doing so well at school this year in 1967, before I was born. So Alan was gifted from his father a great book, a book I would have loved to have gotten as a gift from William Bligh. Okay, so there you go. The Bookseller's Tale is really like, if you love delving and going into bookstores and scrounging around and being forgotten in hours passing, this is like that. I had to, obviously you don't read it in the one sitting, because this is a book to be appreciated, to read a chapter and then to take it in and then to go off and explore the people that he mentions and the stories that he mentions in here. I love this book. I highly recommend it. I would strongly recommend reading this book because of the wonderful stories. And if you are a book lover, you most certainly will get value out of this book. You'll love it. It's something that, I don't know, I found it a joy to read. All right then, thanks for listening and thanks for watching. Bye for now.